We start with a number everyone's wondering about here in Japan. How many domestic spectators will be allowed at the Tokyo Games? With just over a month before the Olympics, health experts say allowing locals into the stands may not be desirable given the coronavirus pandemic.
We believe that holding the games without an audience in the venues is the most desirable option to minimize infection risks.
Omi and 25 other experts submitted their viewpoints to Tokyo Games organizers and the government on Friday. They warn new infection cases could increase in July and August, even if the vaccine rollout continues smoothly across Japan. They also note more transmissible variants could speed up the spread of infection. The proposal recommends stricter restrictions than currently in place if domestic spectators are allowed into event venues. The experts say attendees should be limited to local residents to discourage the flow of people across prefectural borders. They add the government and organizers should ban spectators if there are any signs of infections increasing. Now, the head of the organizing committee says the cap will be decided in line with the government's guideline on large-scale events. Officials plan to ease the capacity limit from 5,000 to 10,000 next month.
The situation is changing day to day. We will continue to analyze data while keeping in mind that, depending on the situation, we may have to ban spectators.
Hashimoto said Olympic and government officials plan to make the final decision on domestic spectators on Monday. The organizing committee says 53,000 people, excluding athletes, will attend the Olympics and Paralympics. That's 25,000 less than last month's estimate. 3,400 people associated with the IOC or IPC, known as the Olympic and Paralympic families, are part of the cut. Now to the wider coronavirus situation in the country. Most prefectures currently under a state of emergency will see that end on Sunday. From next week, bars and restaurants here in Tokyo and Osaka will be able to serve alcohol. But certain conditions will be in place as cases see a slight rise.
Considering the current severe infection situation in Tokyo, we will take strong measures based on the law.
Most parts of Tokyo will follow eased restrictions for another 3 weeks. Bars and restaurants will be allowed to serve alcohol until 7 p.m. to solo guests or groups of 2 for up to 90 minutes. They'll be asked to close by 8 p.m. Tokyo confirmed 453 new cases on Friday. It's the third straight day the figure is larger than the same day from the previous week. Osaka is taking a similar route for wide parts of the prefecture.
It's difficult for eating and drinking establishments to stay in business without serving alcohol. I've listened to the views of many people and made this tough decision.
He added, if infections rise again, it's very likely bars and restaurants will be asked to stop serving alcohol. Nationwide, officials on Friday confirmed more than 1,600 new cases and 48 deaths. The number of patients with severe symptoms was 775, 12 more than the day before. The United States is devoting $3.2 billion to speeding up development of treatment for COVID-19 and other viruses that could turn into pandemics.
It's a whole-of-government effort aimed at developing the next generation of COVID-19 treatments, as well as preparing us for future threats.
The country's top infectious disease expert announced the investment on Thursday. Fauci stressed the need to develop oral antivirals that people can easily obtain. He added vaccines remain the centerpiece of our arsenal in the fight against viruses. The National Institutes of Health and other federal entities will lead the project. They'll collaborate with private firms and research institutes in identifying treatment options to prevent people with COVID-19 from falling seriously ill and support the acceleration of clinical trials. Meanwhile, several pharmaceutical firms, including Merck and Pfizer, are developing antiviral drugs to prevent severe COVID-19. Some have advanced to clinical trials. Now to Indonesia, where authorities are seeing a resurgence of coronavirus infections in recent weeks. More than 12,000 new cases were confirmed on Thursday. The government is on high alert as the number of infections is approaching the peak recorded in January. Jakarta says the resurgence could be tied to people who traveled last month for the holidays following Ramadan. The government also says the Delta variant, first identified in India, is spreading nationwide. President Joko Widodo has pledged to speed up vaccinations at transportation facilities such as train stations and bus terminals. In central Java province, more than 300 medical workers have been infected despite being fully vaccinated. Local officials are urging residents to continue observing anti-infection measures even if they've been inoculated. Iranians are voting in a presidential election, but turnout is expected to be low as some candidates were barred from competing. An anti-U.S. hardline conservative is the frontrunner. Polling stations opened across the country on Friday morning. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei cast his ballot in Tehran. He urged Iranians to get out and vote. People have 4 candidates to choose from. They include Judiciary Chief Ebrahim Raisi and former central bank governor Abdul Nasser Hemmati. Raisi is a conservative hardliner. Hemmati is a reformist. Authorities disqualified some prominent moderate conservative candidates before the election. Raisi is leading opinion polls. The winner will replace Hassan Rouhani, who's stepping down after 8 years.
I hope the economic situation will get better, with sanctions imposed on Iran lifting and relations with other countries improving.
Many young people here can't get married. They also have no jobs and nowhere to go. I hope the situation will improve somehow.
Local media expect voter turnout to be below 50%. That would be the lowest since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Polling stations closed later on Friday, and preliminary results are expected on Saturday. Turning now to Myanmar, where the military crackdown and clashes with civilians continue. NHK has learned Japanese immigration officials are coordinating to grant refugee status to a member of Myanmar's national soccer team if he applies for asylum. Pierre Lian Aung traveled to Japan for a World Cup qualifier last month, but refused to return with his teammates on Wednesday. He's expressed his intent to seek political asylum. The player made headlines when he flashed a 3-finger anti-coup salute before the qualifier match against Japan. Officials at the Immigration Services Agency believe he may face persecution if he returns home. Myanmar's military has not officially responded to the incident. Under emergency measures adopted last month, the agency is prioritizing people from Myanmar in its screening of asylum requests. It's granting residency status even when their bids are rejected. Separately in Myanmar, local media say people are calling for various protest activities ahead of Aung San Suu Kyi's birthday. She turns 76 on Saturday. The ousted leader has been detained since the coup on February 1st. She's facing several charges, including illegally importing walkie-talkie radios. The coronavirus pandemic has put its stamp on new basic policies adopted by the Japanese government for economic and fiscal management. They're the first to come under the administration of Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide. In the case of further infectious diseases, the government will beef up its system for putting emergency measures into effect. It will also look at legal steps to swiftly secure hospital beds and medical personnel, as well as get drugs and vaccines to the public. The basic policies encompass 4 key areas: the environment, digitalization, regional economic revitalization, and boosting the fertility rate. For the last of those, the basic policies call for a swift start to studies on creating a new government office to respond to issues related to children. The government says it'll maintain its goal of achieving a primary balance surplus of the national and local governments in fiscal 2025. It also says it'll review the target year after examining the economic and fiscal impact of the pandemic by the end of this fiscal year. Now, the Bank of Japan has decided to press on with its monetary easing program to help steer the economy through the pandemic. The central bank held a two-day policy meeting that ended Friday. It announced it would maintain its negative short-term interest rate and continue buying unlimited amounts of government bonds. The BOJ says it'll keep supporting companies suffering in the pandemic, and it's ready to take more easing measures as needed. Climate change was also on the agenda.
Climate change and associated countermeasures can make a huge economic impact that can affect the financial situation for businesses from a medium to long-term perspective.
The bank will introduce a new fund provisioning program to support efforts by financial institutions that tackle the issue. Next in weather, a heat wave has made its way from western parts of Europe into the central and eastern regions. Our meteorologist Jonathan Oh explains the forecast for there and elsewhere in our World Weather Report.
Hello, we've been talking about some really hot weather earlier this week in the western areas of Europe as a high pressure system was controlling the pattern. Now low pressure is rolling in and the high moved toward the east, which means the hot weather started spreading toward the east as well. Here's a look at some video coming out of Germany as people there experienced unseasonably warm weather Thursday. Many residents flocking to parks to look for shade and the chance to cool themselves off, and temperatures hitting around 35 degrees Celsius. Germany is expecting even hotter conditions during the weekend, with some areas soaring to near record levels for the month of June. Could even see possibly 38 degrees with that heat really pumping in. And that heat is going to stick around as we go throughout the weekend until around Monday when things should be cooling down into Germany. But the heat will continue back over into places like Moscow in the western areas of Russia as the high pushes eastward. We're talking about rain and thunderstorms over toward the west. So there's that cool down taking place as we see these systems rolling through. 19 in London on Saturday, 27 in Paris. We'll look at this, mid-30s into Berlin. Warsaw at 33 coming up as we go into Saturday. Keeping an eye out on a couple of things here across North America. One, we have a low-pressure system that is rolling across the Ojai River Valley that's going to bring some strong to severe thunderstorms in the area. Be on the lookout for that. Down toward the south, we're having this system developing and likely to become a tropical storm as it comes on shore on Saturday to places like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. So be on the lookout as we could be talking about some areas getting up to 250 millimeters of rainfall with this particular storm. Back toward the west, Denver seeing some showers, but still hot, 30 degrees coming up on Saturday. We're seeing some changes across Japan as rain will be moving in from the west and pushing toward the east. So have the umbrellas nearby as this low will be taking control of the weather. Rain from Fukuoka into Niigata, Sendai, even up to Sapporo as we go through Saturday. Hope you have a wonderful weekend wherever you are.
People in Hong Kong show support for the pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily a day after police raided the publication and arrested officials. Voting begins in Iran's presidential election, with the candidate supported by Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei favored to win. The United Nations Refugee Agency reports nearly 3 million people fled their homes in 2020 because of conflict. The number of displaced people rose to 82 million. And the World Health Organization's Africa director says the continent is in the middle of a third wave of COVID-19 infections.
The court in Belgium has ordered AstraZeneca to deliver 50 million doses to EU members by September 27. However, both sides have claimed victory as the number of doses so far are fewer than Brussels had demanded. Iranians have been voting to elect a new president to succeed Hassan Rouhani, who must stand down after 2 terms. Several reformist candidates were prevented from standing, leaving 3 hardliners and 1 moderate in the race. As Japan starts vaccinating workers ahead of next month's Olympics, their most senior COVID advisor says banning all spectators is the least risky option. But the Prime Minister and head of the Olympics both say they want spectators to attend. And the number of people displaced by war and persecution has risen to a record 82 million. The UN says nearly 3 million more people became refugees last year.